A small group of survivors are left behind after millions of people suddenly vanish and the world is plunged into chaos and destruction. Welcome back to Movies Explained. Today's film is a thriller action from 2014 titled, Left Behind. The movie opens with Chloe Steele landing at JFK Airport. Who is coming home for his father Rayford Steele's surprise birthday party. His father is an airline pilot. As she lands at the airport, Chloe calls her mother to inform her about her arrival but is told that her father was called into work and has to fly to London. While reflecting on this news, Chloe notices a woman and a man having a serious religious discussion and decides to intervene. Chloe, who is a non-believer of God, confronts the religious woman and says that if God knows about all the disasters that are about to happen, why doesn't he do something to avoid it? While the woman tries to answer the question, Chloe isn't convinced but manages to save the man from that woman. Later, Chloe gets to know that the man is Cameron Williams aka Buck, who is a famous investigative journalist. Buck thanks Chloe for saving him from that lady. While they both are having a chat, Chloe notices her father Ray at the airport with a hostess. Ray notices her and approaches her. Chloe asks Ray why isn't he wearing his wedding ring, to which he replies that he takes it off on flights. She also asks about that woman he was with, and is told that she's a colleague. But Chloe isn't convinced and asks if everything is okay between him and Mom. Ray tries to assure her about their marriage and gives her the keys to her car so she can drive home as he leaves for the flight. On the plane before taking off, Ray inquires about a computer problem from the control center. But the traffic controller tells him that some of the equipment is outdated and he is clear to fly. And he begins the flight to London. Meanwhile, Chloe reaches home and is greeted by his little brother Ramy and her mother Irene. Later on, while having a cup of coffee, Irene brings up the topic of religion and wants Chloe to become a believer. She tries to warn Chloe about something that is about to happen, but Chloe gets upset and leaves the house. Ramy asks if he could accompany Chloe. Chloe hesitates but then agrees. Ramy wants her to take him to the mall, but they didn't know something unusual was about to happen. When they reached the mall, everything was normal. But suddenly Chloe realizes that Ramy has vanished. 1 minute he was with her, the next minute he disappeared. When she tries to find him, she notices that she is not alone. It has happened to other people at the mall as well. Meanwhile, the same thing has happened on the plane that Ray is flying. Everyone is confused about what has happened and there was no logical explanation. As if by magic, people vanish without a trace, leaving behind only their clothes and personal belongings. Ray's co-pilot has also disappeared, leaving Ray alone to fly the plane. Ray tries to communicate with the air traffic control to inform them about this strange incident but gets no reply. Everyone is panicking, so Ray asks the air hostess Hattie to calm her nerves and focus on this state of emergency. He asks her to do a head count of the passengers. Buck on the other hand tries to calm the passengers. He also begins to film a video on his camera of the possessions of people who have vanished in order to discover an explanation for what has just occurred. He comes across a passenger who claims that she knows what's happening but is out of her senses to explain anything. Buck comforts her and moves to other passengers to inquire about what they saw. But no one actually saw anything. People just vanished. Ray continuously tries to communicate with the air traffic controller but receives no response. But suddenly he sees something on the radar. Another plane is in the path of flight. Ray tries to communicate with the crew of that flight but seems like their pilots have also vanished. The plane is about to hit them. Ray tells the passengers to put the seatbelts on. He takes control of the plane and bends the yoke to avoid hitting the approaching plane. While attempting to avoid a direct collision, the plane collides with the wing, which catches fire. Ray manages to save his plane but the other plane starts to fly toward the ground. He tries to contact the traffic controller again to request backup for the flight that went down but looks like there is no one at the control center. Hattie tells Buck to take a picture of the wing so she can show it to the captain and help him figure out what's going on. When Buck shows the wing to the captain, he says that they lost the spoiler. This means that when the plane lands, it will not be able to slow down. They're also running out of fuel. Ray informs the passengers that he has decided to turn back to JFK Airport because they are only a couple of hours into the flight and they are low on fuel. On the ground, Chloe is searching for his lost brother. She thinks her brother went home, so she goes there to look for him. When she gets home, she finds no one there, but the shower is running. When she opens the door, she sees that her mother's jewelry is in the bathtub, which means that her mother has also mysteriously vanished. She tries to communicate with her father but fails. On the plane, Ray goes through the stuff of his co-pilot to find a connection between the people who vanished. He asks Hattie to bring the stuff of the crewmate who vanished. When he goes through the stuff he realizes something. He discovered that all of the people who vanished believed in God, and his wife had told him about something similar in the Bible. Hattie is upset because Ray doesn't believe in God and has never talked about God before, so how can he believe something like this? Meanwhile, in the cabin, passengers are worried and horrified. The woman who claimed that she knows what's happened finally reveals the truth. He told the passengers that God took the other passengers. She had read something like this in the Bible and this day was a prophecy. She says God took them to heaven to protect them. Everyone is shocked. Meanwhile, Chloe goes to church to find the pastor who used to preach to her mother. Pastor Barnes tells Chloe that God took her mother and her brother just like he promised. He took them to heaven in a blink of an eye. Chloe inquires why was he not taken? Him being a preacher of religion who preached in the church every day. Pastor Barnes tells her that he used to recite the verses and quoted chapters but he was never a believer, and you have to be a believer. Chloe asks why would God take so many people? Pastor Barnes says God took them to protect them from the darkest times that are coming. On the plane, Ray tries to communicate with the traffic controller and gets a reply. He is told that this anomaly is not just on his plane, this is happening all over the world. Millions of people have disappeared. Ray asks the traffic controller for a clear runway but he is advised to stay in the air because all the runways are full of planes and there is no way he can land on JFK or LaGuardia. Ray informs him about his critical fuel level but the communication gets disrupted. Ray asks Buck to try to communicate with Chloe. Chloe on the other hand is having regrets because of how she treated her mother, so she looks up to the sky and apologizes to her, hoping that her mother is listening from heaven. Meanwhile, she gets a call from Buck and she talks to her father. Both apologize to each other for not being available when their family needed them the most. Ray tells Chloe that he won't be able to make it because he is low on fuel and can't land the plane. Chloe finds an abandoned vehicle and begins searching for a suitable landing spot. Ray tries to persuade the air traffic controller to let him land, but he is once again denied. Chloe finds an empty highway where Ray can land the plane. She gets in a truck nearby and removes the obstacles on the highway and calls Ray to tell him to land on the highway. Buck asks her to send the coordinates from the phone so they could find the highway in the dark. But the highway is not visible from the plane, so he needs some kind of flare to make the start of the runway visible. Chloe then finds some oil barrels and decides to blow them up to make enough fire so Ray can see the place to land. She lights the oil and the explosion becomes visible from the plane. Ray directs the plane to the light and informs the passengers about an emergency landing. But the plane runs out of fuel. So he tries to glide the plane without any fuel but this way the plane will hit the ground really fast and they have no thrust to slow it down. Ray then lands the plane on the road, and they lose their tires, but land successfully and saves all of the remaining passengers. Hattie guides the passengers to the exit. Passengers leave the plane in hurry to avoid any explosion caused by the crash landing. In the midst of the chaos, Chloe finds her father and bursts into tears. They both apologize and promise to stay together. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more videos.